around talking about gender discrimination in sports. So how many of you guys watch men's sports on television? How many of you guys watch women's sports? If you look around, not too many people watch women's sports. And I feel this is due to the lack of exposure of women's sports in the media. For every 10 men's sport commercials, there's only 2 women's sports commercials. So today, I'm going to give you a little background on women's struggle to gain equality in sports and education. I'm going to compare the salaries of men and women, and I'm going to talk about the lack of exposure of women's sports in the media. For a little background, Title IX was a bill passed in 1972 prohibiting sex-based discrimination in sports education. After that came the athletics regulation, which mandated that colleges were subject to a 3-section test. So the first test was for proportionality. The second test was to be able to show the history of women's athletics at the school, and the third test was to show that the school satisfied the desires and expectations of the students. So most colleges felt like the third test was the hardest to comply with because it's hard to satisfy everyone's needs. They felt like there would be a lot of gray areas that way. And a lot of colleges felt like the first test was the easiest to comply with because there was no real set rule as to what proportionality meant. There was no set rule. So with this being said, only 28 out of 303 D1 schools passed the proportionality test. So that's only 9% of D1 schools passing it. So it's still not really equal, but we still can come a long way. In 1971, this was before the Title IX bill, only 31,852 women athletes were in the NCAA. And in 1994, 105,532 women were participating in the NCAA. So that shows that the bill did make an impact, but still inequality. Next, I'm going to talk about salaries. So how much do you think the maximum for women, how much do you think the maximum salary is for women in the WNBA is?
30,000.
30,000?
No, 200,000?
200,000 a day.
20,000?
Okay. The maximum in 2005 was 89,000. The minimum was 31,200, and the team salary cap was 673,000. For the NBA in 2005, the minimum salary was 385,277. The maximum salary was 15.35 million, and the team salary cap was 46 million. So this shows that the NBA, and not only the NBA, a lot of sports industries would rather put more money into their male athletes than into their women athletes. For example, Gilbert Arenas, who hasn't even played, he's an NBA player, and he hasn't played since half the season in 2007. He gets paid $45 million a year, and he's not even on the team, just because he has a contract with the team. While Tina Charles, she was a league MVP, she plays in the Olympics, she only gets paid, which was the league max in 2007, $105,000 a year. And she actually plays, she goes to the Olympics, she's way more active than Gilbert Arenas is. And it's not just in the NBA. The total prize money for the PGA Tour was $256 million, and that's 5 times that of the LPGA Tour, which is $50 million, and that's golf. And then in soccer, for finishing in 3rd place in the 2003 Women's World Cup, each U.S. women's national soccer team member was awarded $25,000, and if they actually won the cup, they would have earned $58,000 a player. And for just reaching the quarterfinals in the World Cup in 2002, the U.S. men's national soccer team members received $200,000 each. And that wasn't even for making it to the cup, it's just quarterfinals. So, next I'm going to talk about the exposure in the media between women and men. And I feel like exposure is the most important thing to pay attention to, because exposure affects how many people know about the games, how many people know, like when the game is on to even watch it, like it affects endorsements, revenue, all of that, and like overall that affects the salaries that the players get paid. So a couple of facts about exposure in the media is that a study about women's coverage showed that in 2004, 8.4% of NBC was women's sports coverage. In 2009, the coverage dropped to only 1.1% of the coverage was women's sports. And the majority of the coverage are the men's biggest three sports, which is baseball, football, and basketball. They receive 71% of the overall coverage. And even on the off seasons, they get covered. Like they'll show baseball in November and football in March and July, and then basketball in July. Like they're not in season, so like they can give that coverage to like women players or women athletes that are actually in season. And to conclude, I talk about how women have came a long way to equality, and we still have a long way to go. Men and women don't have equal salaries, and men get exposure in the media, more exposure in the